Hi, welcome to this special series of Hurricane Helene. For the next few episodes, I have invited some industry people from the world of insurance, from reinsurance, modeling, agency president, the people who are serving the general public. And we just want to bring you the view of what is it like from the insurance industry perspective to see a uncommon natural disaster, catastrophic event at this magnitude. And in my opinion, this event will change a few things in the insurance industry of how we do things and how it's going to be handled in the future. So we're going to invite guests come on the show and just really have a deeper discussion of how this event will impact general public and also the insurance industry. So we thank you for coming on the show. Hi, welcome to this episode of Hurricane Helen Emergency Recording. I am looking to add industry experts to this podcast with so much going on in the media. I feel like I want to bring in some perspective from the insurance industry. And this episode, I am able to grab Tim Lovett. How are you, sir?
Hey, Jeff, I'm doing well. How are you?
Good. You are somebody I know for a long time, respected in the industry, and you know a thing about dealing with claims. And if you can give the audience a little bit of background about yourself, and then I got some questions for you. Maybe there's a lot of people out there going through the challenges. We can help them out.
Yeah, that sounds perfect. So I've been in the insurance industry now for almost 18 years. It's spanned across a number of different things, from claims to operations to leading a wholesale brokerage operation to strategic partnerships at the Hartford. And in addition to that, consulting and advising a lot of different insurance models in the ecosystem. And so touched a little bit of everything over time. The missing link there is I haven't been an actuary. My math skills just weren't up to par to do that. But everything else I've at least been in and out of over a long period of time.
So put some perspective on this hurricane. Some of the news that we got was it went from category 1 to category 4 within 24 hours on a Tuesday, with landfall that was scheduled to hit on Thursday. And you yourself live in Tampa, Florida. You just moved to Tampa, Florida. And, you know, we were going back and forth on text message, and you were actually away on a business trip. So what was that like?
That was stressful, to say the least. You know, we moved here from Ohio about 4 months ago, and you know, obviously, when you move into Florida, you know there's hurricanes. I mean, it's not like you haven't seen the devastation over the years. Luckily, we're inland a little bit, and so it bypassed us and kind of took the path that we were hoping it would take for our purposes, at least, up through the Panhandle. And so my family was good. We lost electricity for about 2 minutes, had some winds, lots of downed trees and things like that. My kids, they're still little. So as you can imagine, like watching the news for a week leading up to it, I mean, it was a bit terrifying for them. But all in all, we got away unscathed and very lucky. And yeah, I do not like being gone during that, especially considering it was our first hurricane when we were in Florida as a family. But luckily we made it through and nothing major crazy happened.
Some of the numbers I saw yesterday, and more numbers are still coming in. 4.5 million Americans out of electricity, out of power, and that doesn't tell how many are out of cell phone service, out of internet service, right? Starlink is now a more crucial thing to buy than ever. And they say the total number of water that was dumped was somewhere around 40 trillion gallons of water that was dumped onto 7 states, I think, that was affected. So, you know, you have background a long time in Nationwide Insurance and Hartford Insurance. What's the challenge like if you are an insurance carrier on a Monday morning, waking up to all of your insured heading you up? What is the challenge like from an insurance carrier perspective, handling the CAT claim like this size?
Yeah, the initial estimates that I've seen, if you go back to Irma and some of the other hurricanes that they came through, the estimates were in the 20 billion range, and final payments were in the 20 billion range. They were originally projecting, when this escalated so quickly from a 1 to a 4, this could equal that. I think so far what we're seeing projection wise is in the 3 to 6 billion range, and a lot of that is even though the devastation was absolutely incredible when it made landfall, that Panhandle area and the Big Bend area is actually a pretty lowly populated area. What was weird about this, to your point, is the turn through Georgia, North Carolina, Tennessee, the impacts to West Virginia. The power outages have been massive. The flooding's been massive in those areas. But the devastation from an impact in the initial push on land was just in such a lowly populated area that it just wrecked a lot of things within that very controlled subset. But then the impact after that was really the lingering effect of the rain and the flooding and the power outages, just creating challenges in areas that frankly aren't set up to handle this. What I saw in a lot of the initial reports was, if you were to go back and look at the building updates that were done in 2018 in Florida, it was set up to sustain a lot of the winds that this storm had. But as you push further into Georgia and North Carolina and all those other things, the infrastructure is not there. So unfortunately, that devastation ended up being far more than I think anyone projected or anticipated. As you look at CARES responses, they're typically set up for rapid response CAT situations. And, what they do is they quickly have the infrastructure deployed to the areas. In this case, it created really logistical challenges because it's such a long trail through a winding part of the U.S. that now what's usually a pretty centralized effort to coordinate logistically actually became a little bit more complex because of this and the string through. And then you add in the power outages, and frankly, that's the really weird curveball right now. I mean, is there damage to properties? Yes, of course, there's flooding and things like that are happening, but these ongoing power outages, I mean, if you were to even look at business owners' policies, I mean, there's coverage for power outages in that. It's going to be a lingering effect for I don't know how long at this point. And so, I think carriers have done a good job considering the span that this thing has taken and the impact that was created over a very large area. But it did absolutely test the response because it spread it out more thinly than they're typically used to.
One thing about CAT team response is they need to get to the destination to set up a little village for their insurer to meet with them. And when so many roads are closed with a bridge failing and dams failing and roads got washed away. So one thing about what you just said earlier on the assessment on damage, Gallagher Re this morning, as of this podcast recording 9:30, they estimate this to be a $10 billion claim, and that number could rise, right? And
it'll rise.
I think
it'll rise.
I don't remember last time I saw 1,150 mile size hurricane sweeping across the entire U.S., right? When you think about 80% of the U.S. population live Texas East, and that's exactly where this storm swept through was Texas East.
Yeah, that's the odd thing about this is if you were to look at the impact of Florida itself, right, and all the statements from Florida carriers that have come out, Citizens and others, it's been pretty clear that this was not materially impactful to Florida. But if you start going up the chain and spread that out across the rest of the states that were impacted, that's where you're really going to see a lot of your admitted carriers getting hit, maybe harder than they ever anticipated in states that you don't really plan for. You don't really plan for this kind of disaster and along the path it took. And the sheer breadth of this is just astonishing to me. So I completely agree with you. I can't think of anything that has been this wide and took this kind of a path across such an odd part of the U.S.
Hurricane Andrew was a hurricane that changed everything we know about Florida insurance, right? And
Yeah.
unfortunately, I think this is now one of those new hurricanes that we know that's going to change a lot of things about U.S. insurance. I have a really mind-blowing text from a friend last night. He said this is going to put a lot of the regional and mutual carriers out of business. Do you believe in that?
Yeah, I do. I believe everyone is already stressed, from a reinsurance perspective. I mean, if you look at the reinsurance market over the past handful of years, it has been challenging to say the least. I mean, it is stress tested the math behind how that all works and what goes into this. Florida specifically has pumped in rate for a number of years, and that rate has prepared them for a moment like this. But if you were to look at, Georgia, Tennessee, West Virginia, I mean, you kind of keep going along the path of the hurricane. The reality is, this is absolutely not something that was in their calculus when they negotiated reinsurance. And the problem becomes, if you haven't calculated for that, it's going to stress test a large majority of those small, mid-sized regionals. I think even nationals, you look at an extended version of their cat load now, right? Cat load you can predict in California, Colorado, Florida. I mean, you see those coming, and you start stepping down into the states that, typically speaking, this isn't supposed to happen. And that's really what sends your rates even to a completely different place than they could have been. And so I'm fearful for what the impact of this is, even though initial estimates are showing potentially less than, what we've seen in past hurricanes in the $15-20 billion range historically. 10 billion hurts, but 10 billion unallocated and unpredicted is really what I'm fearful about and seeing the impact of.
One gentleman I share on my LinkedIn, he posted last night that he needs batteries. He needs battery support. And that was something that I'm not used to seeing people post about. Sean Hendricks, he posted, please share, I'm working with a team using large AG drones for supply deliveries and thermal camera looking for survivors. I need a pilot ASAP to bring us 400 pounds of batteries from Fort Lauderdale to Hickory, North Carolina. Sean Hendricks, those of you don't know, he is part of Mr. Beast team over chief of staff, but Greenville, North Carolina is one of the areas that was affected by this storm. The entire Mr. Beast campus probably all felt the effect of all this. So this is a new perspective. Like, insurance carrier, we have access to drones, but most insurance carrier that you know of, do they use third-party drones for satellite surveillance of, roof when they do underwriting, or do they have their own?
It's really funny. I mean, so first of all, from an underwriting perspective up front, not many folks are utilizing drones nowadays, right? Still agents, boots on the ground, things like that. When you look at claims, satellite images are pretty common, right? So most folks nowadays, most national carriers especially, even many regionals, are leveraging satellite images to assess roofs. And drones are less commonly used, unless it is a third party. And that happens here and there, but it's not as broad as you might imagine. I think, when you look at CAT claims, all the rules go out the window from a typical claims process, right? Like when you're talking about what usually gets done, first notice of loss comes in, adjuster calls the client, they talk through the claim, they'll pull those satellite images. It's this sequenced dance that happens, but without a lot of urgency, right? Not to say that they don't want the claim to be finished, but the urgency typically isn't there. When you look at CAT claims, to your point earlier, I mean, they set up villages down there, Jeff. Like they're literally setting up buses and, taking over different schools and different government buildings to really start funneling people in and out. And it is a very boots on the ground effort, frankly. And that's the reality of most CAT claims. You don't want to take out the human component is really where carriers are coming from in that case, because it's an emotional time, man. It's about getting in your community and helping and digging in. And so you'll see a lot more manual effort on the claims side in a CAT claim than you do even in a traditional claim. But a lot of that is just getting your hands dirty and, trying to assess what you can on the ground, because it's the best way to really expedite it, versus waiting on satellite images and some other things that, can typically take a little bit longer.
So we talk about the industry being stressed, and we have a situation right now in our industry that 400,000 to 500,000 people are retiring within the next 2 years. That is going to affect every single area, probably including the claim area and the CAT claim area, right? So what do you think is going to come out of this when we putting our people to work for 2 weeks, 3 weeks away from their family, and then we have so many people leaving and retiring from the industry? Right now, it's a lot of bad things are all aligning.
It's a challenge, to be honest with you, when you look at, the adjuster workforce, and you think about the claims workforce of carriers. CAT is considered, the special forces group of insurance carriers. And so you look at that CAT claims unit, and it's typically very experienced, tenured claims adjusters. I mean, not tossing them out, a lot of early in their career folks to go handle CAT claims. So, I mean, I agree. I think when you look at, the impact of the insurance industry over a long period of time and different segments from just a sheer attrition standpoint and backfill standpoint of talent, claims is one of those areas that, I mean, if we're being honest, I say this lovingly to my claims folks. I've had 2 jobs in my life that I don't really have a particular interest in going back to. One is cleaning state park bathrooms, and the other is claims. It's a lot of stress, very hard work. It's hard to be away from family, and CAT claims are becoming way more prevalent as a frequency event versus a severity event. And so you've got a lot of really worn out adjusters that, maybe would have coasted another 5 or 10 years after retirement age, but likely won't now. And so it may actually expedite that. And then you have all the predictions coming out right now are it's going to be above average back half of the hurricane season. And so, I think when you start stacking on the potential of multiple hurricanes, within a really short timeline, you're just further stressing that workforce. And so, I mean, I think you look at what folks need to do to figure out how to make this a more, attractive side of insurance to get into. And I mean, there is a lot of effort that I think needs to go in this and focus to try to backfill what we know is going to happen. Because again, the folks in claims, they're tenured usually to get the CAT side. And that's where, frankly, you need the experience and support. So bringing in new talent's never been more important.
Shifting to auto side real quick, we're going to see a flood. I hate to use that word, flood of calls coming today for comprehensive claim because people's cars got buried in the flood, and probably see a spike in the used car market and new car purchase market because people need replacement. But, how do you think that's going to change the industry?
I think for a long period of time, the auto industry has been under stress anyway. And I think you look at let's call it like a brief moment of reprieve during COVID. That was maybe one of the only benefits of COVID, which was the auto claim side of the house kind of took a bit of a break, especially on the business insurance side of things. Personal lines did too, just people traveling less. And so, I think you look at an event like this and again, it just, all that course correcting and let's call it luck to some extent that happened to be able to straighten out some of the combined ratios of some of the carriers that were really struggling is now put back into question. Especially, again, you look at these areas where, I think if you were to ask somebody if you live in Atlanta or anywhere in Kentucky or Nashville or Knoxville, Tennessee, I don't know that the first thing that you would say is, well, if a hurricane happens, I'm going to get flooded. And so a lot of people, people joke around all the time about Floridians not taking hurricanes seriously. Be honest, I don't think anybody was prepared for that. So nobody moved their cars or did anything or got to high ground or any of that stuff. And so I think the impact's going to be rolling in over a period of months. I don't think it's anything that we're going to have the answer to quickly. And I think, unfortunately, it's putting stress back into a side of our industry that has been stressed for probably too long. And we're going to take further rate action. You're going to see further rate action happen. And it's just going to get, really challenging in a market that's already hard. I think it's just going to make it even worse, frankly.
Florida have experience dealing with this from reinsurance, from claim perspective. But when you move into inland, as far as Asheville, which is
Oh,
4 hours west of Raleigh, right? Like Raleigh is two
yeah.
hour west of inland, and then Asheville is 4 more hours. Like they never thought for one
No,
day that they would experience this, especially with the highest elevation on the East Coast, right?
no.
And we it went all the way up inland to Virginia, right? Like
Mm,
entire Western Virginia, Southern Virginia was affected by this. And I remember when the governor issued state of emergency, everyone just laughed and nobody took it seriously.
yeah, that's right.
I even made a post and somebody online was saying that this is fear mongering. This is Virginia, right? Someone called me
Yeah.
fear mongering. I was like, well, it's better to prepare. But just insurance perspective, like there's so many little carriers that have premium size 50 to $100 million premiums, and they're just not built for this.
No, no. They've been insulated, especially with those regional carriers and, up some of the East Coast and in Georgia. And I mean, that's some of the predominant regional carriers, some of the really the well-run, well-orchestrated, well-situated regional carriers who've written a lot of customers and gained a lot of market share. They're situated there. And no, this was not in the math, right? They don't sit there and look at a hurricane path that comes the way this did and say this could happen to us and the impact and predict it. And so I don't disagree. I think there's about to be a lot of regionals that are under quite a bit of stress. I think you already have nationals that have struggled in and out of the market in many different areas over a period of time. And so you're really just adding to the list at this point, right? I think we need an event at some point that subtracts and helps get folks back on the right path. But rate increases just continue, and I think regionals have insulated that a bit and been able to offload some of the market challenges that some of the nationals have had. That's been awesome. But now you look at an event like this, and you got to ask yourself a question: what happens in 6 months to a year, right? As they assess this damage and realign rate, like you're already going to take an incredibly chaotic marketplace that's in some cases wiping out whole states. Like California has had some troubles. Florida's turning around, but again, that doesn't mean the premiums are affordable for most families. So I'm scared to see what the impact is, from a financial result. Luckily, we've been in a market environment that has, been favorable just from an investment standpoint to a lot of the carriers. And so that's freed up some of the capital and performed better. But I mean, if you were to take a perfect storm event and have the market go down and have this impact on top of it, it's going to get really ugly, I think, in the marketplace. Unfortunately, I wish I had a better phrase for that, but we'll have to see how it plays out.
Yeah, I was chatting with Nick Lamparelli, on an earlier podcast recording, and he does a lot of cap prediction and consulting with insurance carrier. And what he said to me was interesting, that there's just so many little carriers, smaller carrier size, that don't have a cap prediction model, don't have a strategy around cap predictions, and only the bigger carriers that's truly coastal can afford those things. And then it's dawned on me that this is a perfect example, right? All these people in Ohio, Virginia never prepared for a cat of an inland hurricane like this.
Yeah, that's a spot on comment, and I think that the reality is, unfortunately, that weather's becoming incredibly unpredictable right now, and these hurricanes are taking weird paths. The intensity to this, I mean, you mentioned this earlier. You're talking about a 24-hour period where it went from Cat 1 to Cat 4, right? And rapid intensification, but that's also what pushed it to drive further in, right? And that to me is, it's a scary place to be, because you look at market share, and you were to take the top 10 carriers. I mean, it's all pretty thin in terms of market share of consumers, and it's spread pretty well. But then you start looking at some of these regionals that operate in, let's say, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 states. They have actually significant market share of consumers within that geography. And you start throwing events like these into those regional carriers that really aren't set up to kind of operate that way. And, I think you're going to see a whole different side of the market environment for the insurance industry, because admitted markets and E&S have been trading insureds back and forth for a number of years. But you start throwing regionals into that, that's a whole new curveball that I think, first of all, agencies, and brokers aren't really set up to handle. I mean, let's be honest, like, you don't want to go out and get 100 different appointments as a small independent agent or and as a captive, you're on your own. So, I mean, one of the challenges is when you look at those regional carriers and, how they could potentially shift and trade things around, that's a really challenging environment to operate in as a broker. And so curious to see how that plays out over the next few years, to be honest.
Whatever situation, disaster, tragedy, it brings innovation and opportunities. Opportunities usually are born in the face of tragedy events, right? What do you see come out of this? Let's put that in multiple phase questions. What do you see come out of this potentially for carriers? What do you see come out of this potentially for agents, for software company, and also one of your favorite subject, TPAs? So if you can, throw your prediction out of those four.
Yeah, I think, carriers are going to get tested to be more innovative in terms of how they're approaching mass catastrophe events like this, where it's a large geography. Again, I go back to the logistics piece, right? I think when you look at how they're set up to deploy those CAT teams in certain areas, they're very, very, very specific activation units within a specific zone in a specific area. And I think what an event like this is going to really create at the carriers is a whole different lens on what activating a CAT response is to a wider CAT event, right? And I think, to me, you're going to have to leverage, and you mentioned this earlier with drones and other things, you're going to have to leverage modern technology to be a little more effective at handling it over such a long tail. And so I think carriers are going to be stressed to figure out the logistical math. And I think a lot of good comes out of that practice, to be honest, because I don't think this is the first. I think we're going to see many more events like this that are wider bursts than most of our traditional catastrophes. I think you start looking around the industry at some of the software, and I mean, with the advancements of AI nowadays, I think, as much as I hate to use that buzzword, I think somebody's got to ask themselves, like, what is out there and what software companies are orienting themselves around supporting claims. And that comes in two phases, right? I think there's the pre-side of things, where to get better around predicting catastrophes, to get better around understanding what the impact is to certain areas. And then post, which is leveraging AI to do some of the administrative things to do it quicker and faster when there's such a large group of people that have been impacted by this. I think AI plays a big role in learning from this. And I think we're all fascinated with the front end use of AI, meaning sales, right? Everybody wants to use it for sales because that's where the dollars roll in on the front end. But I think we really have to, as an industry, do some introspection to say, yeah, but how do we make it better on the back end? And how do we become more efficient for our insureds, our brokers, our as carriers, if that's the case? And so that's the other ad that I would have. I would be curious to see what comes out of that from a software side. And then, take you already know this is near and dear to my heart, but, take somebody like ClaimCenter. I mean, they're built to be able to help support these types of events, frankly. And a lot of the challenge for brokers and agencies and carriers themselves is simply contacting everybody and really getting the process started, getting everything coordinated. And I think outside help's needed, frankly. I think a lot of agencies and brokers are too small to handle the sheer quantity of insureds that are impacted in any one of these geographies that they're in. Carriers themselves are extremely short-staffed on the claims adjuster side already, and most would admit that capacity is an issue. So, I hold it near and dear to my heart because I see solutions out there that can be materially impactfully helpful. We just, as an industry, have to stand up and work together to figure out how to advance and work as a cohesive unit for the betterment of the insureds, given the situation, given the fact that catastrophe claims aren't going away. I mean, we're going to see more in a very short span.
And then recently, you guys just set up bilingual for ClaimCenter, right?
Yeah, that's right. And so we can support it. I mean, I think the key for us is, wanting to be able to help in the marketplace and help insureds and help agents and help carriers be really what they need to be, which is as quick as possible, do the right thing for the insureds. And I think you look at these situations and it's unfortunate, right? Like, cat claims are the worst to me. I mean, it's not like you lit a match and toss it on your house. I mean, there's no fraud's not in this one. You just really need to expedite the process and get your payment and move on. So that's right. We're here to support, and my hope is that over a period of time, we'll be able to help many of these folks that are out there.
Thank you very much for coming on the podcast and help me get one up really quick with everything that's going on right now. And you guys got another one coming this weekend.
Yeah, that's right. And it's, it depends on which model you look at, right? It's hard, but I mean, it looks like there's potential. It could take almost an identical path to Helene, and that's unfortunate for a lot of reasons. I mean, they're still trying to assess damage. So, yeah, and it's, again, the back half of the hurricane season. I mean, if you look at all that's out, right now and out and around, there's quite a few in quite a few different directions that could hit all over the southeastern United States. So definitely a little worried thinking about everybody out there. I know there's 64 folks, I think, so far that have lost their lives in this event, and obviously that count could keep going up. So my heart goes out to those people, and just really hope that we get through this and continue to get better.
Yes, let's cross our fingers, and hopefully the first responders and then the people that's deployed in the field is finding those survivors. And thank you, Tim, for coming on the podcast.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me.